Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is an exciting topic we're talking about, and that is what to look for when purchasing a fixer-upper home. Now, I am no expert at this, but I have purchased two different houses that needed some creative thinking, some outside of the box thinking as well. And we've renovated both houses from top to bottom, and I learned a few things along the way that I just thought I could share with you guys. If you're in the market for a fixer-upper, you know, there are some key things that you should look for and like keep in mind, like some things that are easily to change and some things that are a little bit harder and some things that you can do yourself. Because let's be real, renovating is not cheap, to say the very least. I'm not gonna get into numbers, but I'm a frugal person and renovating can get pretty expensive. So if you are a DIYer and you wanna tackle some things and you're not really sure about the house buying process and like what to look for in your next fixer-upper, stay tuned and listen to the 10 things that you should look for in a fixer-upper. Okay, so first thing is first. We've all heard this. Buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. We did that when we bought our house in West Virginia. We found this beautiful, quaint neighborhood down by the river. It had 100-year-old oak trees flanking the streets. It was very walkable, a very, very cute house. It was the most desired location and honestly one of the prettiest streets that I ever have seen. Like it was beautiful, especially in the spring and fall. We bought the absolute worst house. It had been sitting on the market for a very long time. We kind of were able to lowball our offer and make sure that we were able to get in that neighborhood, especially there. Like there's some really nice areas with like multi-million-dollar homes, and there's some really unnice areas. And it was hard to find a place that like typical homes and like 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses actually sit on the market a lot longer, just because there isn't a lot of young families moving into that area. You know, it's more so established people that in their careers that are kind of in the coal industry or in the chemical industry. So there's a very small market. So we wanted to make sure that once we moved that we would be able to sell that house. Just to give you like a backstory, like our West Virginia house was a like commercial garage on the bottom with an apartment upstairs. So like the layout was like super funky, untraditional. It was pushed really far back on the lot to access the alley. So there were a lot of things that we learned from that house that we capitalized on when buying this house. So the second thing when you're touring a house to look for is potential, like extra potential space. So think about an attic that you can transform and finish off, an unfinished basement, even potentially like the space outside to do an addition. Square footage sells homes. We know this, like there's only so much room that your lot and that your house can support. So having those untapped areas that you can kind of chip away at or potentially have someone or help you finish it is really good, because any additional square footage that you can add onto your home is money in your pocket. Like, you know, if you got a space over your garage that can be a bonus room, if you have, you know, like I said, an unfinished basement, like you could double your square footage of your home if it's done properly, which is great. This house, we actually had an outdoor, it was only accessible outside, laundry room. And we actually finished that and connected it to the interior of the house. And so we did add square footage on this house. It also has an addition on the back. Compared to other homes in this neighborhood, we have a lot more square footage for our home. Is it bedrooms and bathrooms? No, but without it, our house would feel really, really small. So that was something that we inherited, but it was a good move by the previous owner. Okay, the next thing to consider is natural light. And this is something that a lot of people talk about when they're, you know, touring homes. You don't want a home that feels dark and dank and just like really gloomy, right? Like today is a really gloomy day outside, y'all. It's been raining for like weeks, I feel like. But even on a cloudy day, our sunroom has so much natural light flooding in. It's amazing. And even our bedroom is kind of bright even on a cloudy day, which is really great. You know, depending on where you're located, you know, you might want a south facing home. At least for my neck of the woods in the northern hemisphere, you want south facing windows. Now, we have a lot of really great natural light in our West Virginia home, and we have decent light in this house. I will say our kitchen is the center of the house, and because it is genuinely the center of the house, it has no true windows, so it doesn't really get a lot of natural light, and I wish it did. And also this room doesn't get, I mean, it has a huge window, but it doesn't get the natural light that you would expect it to because we're not facing south. Now I will say, like, we put in can lights and that kind of helped. You could also have additional windows, you know, you're gonna have some light coming in, but that is one thing that you cannot change about your house, like the amount of light that it gets, other than adding windows. And you can do that, but like it's expensive. So just be mindful of that. Like it makes the space feel larger when you have more natural light. Okay, the next thing, which is really hard to look past, but look for on your listings houses that have atrocious paint colors or light fixtures or things like that. Those are simple fixes. Let me tell you, there are houses that get passed by because of the current homeowner's style. Like it may not be your style and you can't really look past it. Really bright, vivid paint colors. Like a lot of people are very intimidated by paint colors, and y'all, paint is the easiest. And honestly, even though paint is expensive right now, or has gone up recently, it still is the cheapest renovation change that you can make to your house. Like this house, y'all, I had a bright pink bedroom. We had some really peachy tones on the wall. We had brown 70s wood paneling and some really ugly carpet. Like our kitchen was pea green and mustard yellow. Like it had some funky colors in it. And while it was a choice, it was not something that we wanted to have in our home. So we actually I painted this house by myself. I mean, it took me probably a month of just like priming and painting to get all the colors out, but it was something that we were able to look beyond and change. We recently were looking at a different listing. We're not moving, but I'm that person that just likes to get on Zillow and see what I see. And there was this really cute English cottage style house that had a bright purple living room, a tangerine orange like kitchen and bathroom, and like bright school bus yellow walls. And that thing sat on the market for so long, like so long, because nobody wants to paint. And the reality of it is like you can buy the house and live in it and have hideous colors on the wall. And it's easy, y'all. It's easy. It's time consuming. You can hire it out. You know, you're going to pay more if you hire it out, but painting is something that just takes time and practice, and you can paint yourself. The other thing to consider is really hideous light fixtures. Now, if you are not confident, don't do this, but changing out a light fixture is very, very easy. It's 3 wires at most, a couple of screws, and some people walk in and they're like, oh, it has 70s style lighting. Well, guess what, y'all? You can thrift a light, you can make your own, you can buy it off of Etsy, you can buy it off of Amazon. Like you can find light fixtures pretty much anywhere, and they're relatively affordable. Now, I mean, like, let me tell you, there are some light fixtures that will break your bank, but those are the pieces that you invest in if you're going to stay there for a long time. But just because there is a hideous light fixture in your home doesn't mean you're stuck with it. And if you don't want to change it over, hiring an electrician to come through and change out the lights is not that expensive. So if you go into a house and you see terrible colors on the walls and terrible lighting, consider that as a really easy potential thing to change out. Okay, another thing to make sure you have is good flow. There is nothing worse than buying a house that has no flow and has a choppy floor plan. You can have the smallest house. Our house is really small. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Y'all saw my home tour. I'll link it below in case you missed that and you want to check it out. But our house is not a big house at all. I think we're 1,300 square feet with our laundry room addition. And the reality of it is it doesn't feel small because we have really good flow. You don't run into people. You can kind of go around. Our West Virginia house did not have good flow. It was very choppy, at least the downstairs, because it was 3 bays for cars and they were made out of cinder blocks. So it was really, really hard to have good flow because it wasn't originally made to have that purpose. And as y'all probably know, if you've ever watched HGTV, taking down walls is not always the cheapest. Sometimes it can be easy peasy, but it's not always. And like creating that flow sometimes is a lot harder, or you end up losing usable square footage because you're making that flow. So when you're walking through it, especially if you're walking through an open house, like think about it if you're having a party, like would there be a bottleneck for people to get through? If there is, like maybe it doesn't have the best flow. So that's definitely something that's more expensive to change, and it's better to buy a house that has good flow than not. Okay, next up, high ceilings. Again, you can have the smallest house, but if it has tall ceilings, it'll feel very spacious. Exact opposite is if you have low ceilings. You can have a massive house, but if you have low ceilings, it just feels like it's kind of coming in on you. And there's not much you can do about that. Honestly, like, unless you're a single story and you have a vaulted roof line, you can't really change the height of your ceilings. And even if you do, it's expensive, and you probably have like electrical, and I mean, you get into big money if you're trying to change ceiling heights. Our West Virginia house had lower ceilings on the first floor, and it just felt so cave-like. You know, luckily we had natural light, but it was still really hard to kind of feel like you had space. I used a lot of lighter colors. We actually had some drop downs for like plumbing and whatnot. Which made it really hard to kind of even find light fixtures, honestly. We had to do a lot of flush mounts so that they didn't hang down. That's something that is very expensive to change if it's even possible to change. So I would recommend finding a house that has at least, well, really 9-foot ceilings is ideal, or higher. So a lot of older houses, you might find 12-foot ceilings, or even in like lofts and stuff. And like I said, that's something you can't really change about the house. So really be mindful of that when you're walking through the properties that you're looking at and considering. Next up is location of major appliances and utilities. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking, where is your kitchen sink? Where is your stove, your fridge? Where's your toilet? Where's the toilet placed? Is it a good layout for the bathroom? Is it a good layout for the kitchen? If those things are good, like in a nice location, it is very easy to do a facelift renovation by either changing out cabinets or, you know, hardware or painting or vanities, that kind of thing. Tile, you can change out all of that for a lot less. Where you get into big ticket renovations is moving placement of those things. So like, for instance, if you want to take your toilet from one side of the room across to the other, that's going to cost you money. And depending on your foundation, you know, if it's a slab on grade, aka they just pour a slab of concrete on top of the ground, you have to jackhammer that up to move it. We had this in our West Virginia house, and we had a bathroom, laundry room area, and we kind of took all of that space and reconfigured it into like a multi-purpose space. And to move, we did not move the toilet, but we moved the placement of the tub. No, excuse me. We did move the toilet. We left the tub where it was. We just flipped it and moved the toilet 4 feet. Thousands of dollars, because we had to tear up the concrete to access the plumbing to move the toilet. It was a lesson that we learned. Our washer and dryer didn't move. The only thing that changed was the placement of the hot water heater and the toilet. That's the only plumbing that changed. And the sink. I take that back. And the sink. So 3 things. And it was a huge undertaking. Y'all, they had to rip up all the flooring, jackhammer the slab. They had to then backfill it, pour concrete over top of that to move those 3 things. So it was a process. We had to live through that. It really was eye-opening as to why that is so important, especially in a kitchen. You can kind of move your fridge around depending on where your plugs are. Like, that's not a huge deal, but your sink is important to know the placement. Like, if you want to take it from the back row of the cabinets to the kitchen island, like, that could be costly. The stove is something to consider because it has to have a specific electrical plug. So if you want to move your stove even 3 feet over, the likelihood is you're going to have to hire a certified electrician to come out and move that plug 3 feet over. Like, it can be a big deal. Especially the toilet. Like, the plumbing that's required for the toilet is definitely something that can be quite costly as well. So just consider that placement. You're like, oh, I hate these cabinets, or, oh, I would like to, retile the bathroom, but I don't mind where the toilet is. You're probably pretty good. You're just gonna kind of be investing your money into the aesthetic components instead of the meat and potatoes and like the guts of your house. And if you're doing a fixer-upper, you want to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? Like, if you could spend, $20,000 doing a facelift instead of $50,000 moving stuff, then you'd rather spend the $20,000 and put that into making it what you want it to be. Okay, another thing that I always keep an eye out for is character within the home. If you're looking for a fixer-upper, you likely would like to have an older home, right? Like, something that's a little outdated, but not necessarily like full gut, right? So I like to look for houses that have character. Now, that can be in a multitude of things depending on what style of homes are in your area and what you personally are looking for. So like, say if you're really intrigued by craftsman or Victorian homes, you're gonna look for beautiful moldings and craftsmanship and cabinetry and built-ins and beautiful staircases. If you're looking for a mid-century modern home, you are kind of looking more into those sleek lines and interesting fireplaces and a lot of wood paneling that is like custom built. So those things add the value to the home and make your home unique. Now, when you're doing a fixer-upper, and you want to keep the integrity of those. So our West Virginia house was built in the 1940s. We had a slate tile roof, which gave so much character. We had beautiful, beautiful moldings in the house, like around the windows and the door frames, with really ornate and like attention to detail trim around it. There was a supplier in West Virginia that specialized in custom trim and moldings, and we actually had them match a couple of pieces for when we did renovate, like around our doors and whatnot, which we wanted to have that throughout the house, right? So we tried to put that character back in. In this house, there are built-ins that we kept. There were also some really interesting trim moldings that were a little bit more modern. So it was important to us to keep those things intact in this house. Kind of was renovated in the 70s and again in the early 2000s. So it's had some facelifts to it. I think some of the original character was probably out. I know that they renovated the bathroom in the 70s or maybe it was the 80s when they had to have handicap accessible stuff. So I think the original beautiful tile that was like maybe a quirky color had been ripped out. Sometimes in these houses, especially in this neighborhood, you'll see like the teal color tiles and pink and yellow. If we had that, we probably would have kept it because it was original to the house if it was in good condition, right? Our West Virginia house had black and white tile. It was in terrible condition and it had custom marble flooring or marble tile flooring, and we tried to keep it, but unfortunately we had a leak, and to fix the leak we had to rip it out and put something new in. Now what I did put in was very comparable to what was there. Like, I wanted to try and match it back to the era of the house, which I personally think is important when renovating a home. You want the comfort of modern amenities, but you also don't want to strip the house of its character. The reality of it is if you wanted a house that felt cookie cutter and like totally new, you would either A, buy a flip home, or B, buy a brand new house. I think the draw of a fixer-upper is that you get some of those character pieces. Okay, the next up, second to last on our list, is landscaping. So a realtor will tell you that you only have, I think it's like the 4 seconds after you drive up to the house to make an impression on potential buyers. That's before they even step foot. Now granted, there's Zillow and things, so people will kind of look past it sometimes and still go look at the house. A lot of people get turned off about a house that's perfectly fine, that just needs a little bit of work, by the outside, right? So curb appeal, that's what we're talking about, guys. So that is a very easily DIY-able thing. Like, you can just get out your shovels and your rakes and your pruning tools and get to work and pull out old bushes, you know, trim them back, consider putting in a walkway. Like, those are all very DIY-able things. Ian and I did it. Y'all, in West Virginia, we had no backyard. I'm gonna put some clips in here for you. It was a concrete pad, and our realtor thought I was bonkers for considering this house because it had no backyard. I told Craig, I said, I think this could be a really sweet hidden gem of a backyard. Now, it was not wide, like it was 50 feet wide by 10 feet deep, y'all. It was not big at all, but I was able to take this concrete pad, we ripped it up, we put in a privacy fence, and Ian and I laid the patio, and we planted sod, and we kind of decorated it so that it felt like an extension of the house. And everybody thought I was crazy, y'all. They thought I was absolutely crazy. Now, I know that's the backyard. In this house, you know, the lady who owned this house before us had an impeccable green thumb. The yard was perfectly exquisite. Everything was trimmed to perfection, but there was no like walkway path up to the front porch. So it was just weird. And I was like, this doesn't feel inviting. Like, you had to like walk through the yard to get to the front door. It was weird. I put in a new walkway. I did it on a budget. Even in our West Virginia houses, there was this hedge of like cedar bushes that just hid the front of the house. If I have a picture, I'll insert it here. And, you know, we could see the air conditioner from the front. Like, it had this like really old aluminum like canopy over top, and it was just kind of sad. It needed some love. It needed some life brought into it. It needed the weeds pulled. If you pull up to a house and it looks shabby, but really the roof is in good shape, the flow is good, it gets lots of natural light, or maybe it gets light, but it could be more because there's this massive bush blocking the window, and it just looks overgrown and looks, you know, kind of decrepit because it just hasn't been taken care of, and it needs some landscaping and maybe a walkway or maybe some raised planters. Consider that. Redoing your landscaping of your house can immediately add 15 to 20% of the value of your house just by changing the landscaping, by taming it, putting in some different things, a walkway, and it's really affordable, and it's something you can do yourself. Okay. Last thing to consider, and I kind of touched on it in my last statement, or have the big ticket items recently been updated? So we're talking HVAC system, roof, windows, water line to the main street, hot water heater, appliances. But if those big ticket items have been renovated or done, you are saving yourself tons of money. A typical roof replacement, depending on the size of the house, is anywhere between 5 and 10 grand. A new HVAC system is like 5 grand. If the foundation is in good shape, like obviously you want the foundation of your home to be solid, then that's money in the bank. I personally would not buy a house that has foundation issues. Like, you can correct some of them, and sometimes it's, you know, you start renovating and then you find foundation issues. Like, it happens. It's not that they can't be repaired. But the reality of it is, if those big ticket items are taken care of and you don't have to invest in them, then that means all of your budget for renovating your house can go into like putting the lipstick or the finishing touches into the house. So, you know, if there's like some flooring you don't like, that's a lot cheaper to replace than putting a new roof on. Also, those things you typically have to address right when you move in. Like having a roof that needs to be replaced, like you're just asking for leaks. You know, depending on your budget, you can get a HELOC, but if you're just buying the house, like that's a big ticket item. Also, other things to consider for big ticket items are plumbing. We had a pipe here that was the old galvanized pipe. It was the only piece of plumbing that had not been updated through years of renovation and stuff like that. So we actually had that replaced, and that was not terrible because it was only one pipe. Electrical, you know, if you have knob and tube, like that is not always considered safe. Updating electrical is expensive, especially if you have to update your breaker box. And make sure, check out the breaker box and see, is it fully loaded? Like, is there not a single breaker that's not assigned? If that's the case, like you're maxed out, and if you want to add anything, well, you're gonna have to add a new breaker if it's maxed out. Also, when you're walking through along with those big ticket items, like make sure to look for water stains on the ceilings for old leaks. You know, they may have had them repaired, but we had some in this house where, you know, they repaired it, but they didn't do a very good job. So like I was able to like cut it out and patch it. You know, that's something to really look for. Also, flickering lights when you go through, if the lights flicker, that's a pretty good indicator of, you know, crummy electrical, or maybe the wiring's a little bit loose and you should probably get that checked out. And one last thing to look out for is the slope of the land. Now, in West Virginia, we lived on a very flat lot, so we didn't have any issues. On this lot, our lot actually slopes down in the back and down on one side of us. That's something that we don't really have issues with. But if you were at the bottom of a hill, then you might see flooding happening, which can affect your foundation. Our rental house before here, y'all, it was down slope, like it was sloped downhill, and it flooded the whole front yard every time it rained. And you know, the reality of it is like that happens. Like every house can't be up on the hill, and you want to make sure that there's like some decent drainage and that your gutters work. That's another high ticket item. Do you have gutters? Are they hanging off? Like gutters are not cheap to fix or add. So I hope this helped you to kind of identify some things if you're in the market for your first or second or 10th DIY fixer-upper. Just some things that I personally have learned throughout the process, some things that we really took to heart on our second one. You know, I told Ian, I was like, I want to find a house that like really is just cosmetic things. So this is kind of more so of the things to look for that have already been fixed, or things that are easily changeable. So I hope this helped you guys. Maybe you can learn from some of my trials and tribulations. Let me know in the comments below. Is this something that you would ever do yourself? Is it something that scares you then you would never want to? And there's nothing wrong with that, guys. If you want to hire it out, like go for it. I am all for hiring people when it is outside of the scope of work that I personally feel confident in doing. There is nothing wrong with that. I am not saying that there is at all. But if you want to tackle something and you're kind of getting your feet wet and you're gaining DIY skills and you know that kind of thing, this I hope is a really decent guide to like help you formulate what property is the best property for you, and really consider things that you cannot change about the house. You know, again, I learned a lot through our house in West Virginia. I learned a lot in this house. I've learned lessons in both. I learned things that I would never do again. I'm hoping that this helps you learn a few things, or maybe it solidifies a few things that you know you're kind of facing now or considering. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button below, and I will see you guys next Saturday for a new video. I upload every Saturday at 6 a.m. So come along, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.